All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. This is going to be the class number 2 on what we began yesterday, doubling up for Moshiach. So it's interesting. I wasn't intending this yesterday, but it turned out it's going to be a double class because I only gave half yesterday, and today will be the second half of the class. The real reason that consciously I doubled up this class was because simply I don't know, while I was teaching yesterday, I was literally, my brain was shutting down. It was very hard for me to concentrate, and I had to stop the class. I went longer because I went off subject, which I thought was a fascinating discussion that we had yesterday about the three tribes that inherited land outside of the land of Israel. Um, so, first of all, I would like to make clear, if you're listening to this class, please listen to part one, because this is, I'm starting in the middle over here, um, of what we've discussed in part one. And part one is fascinating, some of the subject that we discussed. The So it's interesting that the name of the class is doubling up for Mashiach, because we're talking about how Mashiach, how we are the exile leads us to a great future, a great light. The darkness leads to the greatest light, and that light is hinted to in an element of double. First of all, it's a double portion this week, but that's not only here. There's quite a few double portions of Torah. There are quite a many Torah portions that double up depending on the calendar year. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all. It's interesting how many there are. Let's actually do that. Okay, so it's interesting, in Genesis there's no double. It's always only single Torah portions. In Shemos is when it starts, the possibility. In Exodus is where it starts to double up. The first possible doubling up parsha is Truma and Tetzaveh. So that's one. The next one is Vayakel and Pekude, which is two of them in the double doubles in the Torah report in the book of Exodus. Oh, that's interesting, because Exodus is about redemption. So in the Torah book that's about redemption, we begin to double up Torah portions, and we have doubling. I like that. Okay, see, you always find nice things when you're when we're not so lazy, and we go into it. Okay, let's take a look. In Leviticus, we have uh, Tazria Metzora, which can be doubled. By the way, it's also a parsha which is all about redemption, which I'm not going to go into right now. Tazria Metzora is the third one, and then Acharei Mos and Kedoshim, which again is sometimes doubled. So we have four already, and then we have Bahar Bechukosai, which could be doubled. So there's two in Exodus and three in Leviticus. It's interesting. And we're finding another interesting parallel. Exodus is the second book of the Torah, and it has two doublings. Leviticus, Vayikra, is the third book of the Torah, and it has three twins. Now, it doesn't always mean that we always double, but it's possible to double. Okay, leap years usually have an extra month, so it causes us to spread them out, and we double less. But in regular years like this year, when it's not a leap year, there's quite a few doubles. Okay, so we have already 5 doubles. Then we go to Sefer Bamidbar. Now, in the book of Numbers, the first doubling portion is Chukas Balak, right? Yeah, Chukas and Balak is the first possible double. And the second possible double is Matos and Masei. So there's only, which is this week's Torah portion. So that gives you 7. Oh, all the 7 are special. And 7 is also related to redemption. Then this gives us a good, because the number 7 is Shabbos, and Shabbos is Yom Shekulo Shabbos, and we know that the main idea of redemption is in the 7th millennium. Everything is in the future, so that's cool. So that's Matos. Masa is the next double. which is this week's Torah portion. And then in the book of Deuteronomy, in the book of Devarim, so only one double, and that is Nitzavim Vayelach, if I'm correct. He says, yeah, only one double, which is Nitzavim Vayelach, which is almost always connected. Yeah. So altogether, there are 8 doubles. Okay. Never did the math. So there are 8 possible Torah portions that double up. In any case, we find that Parshas Matos is a double Torah. It goes Matos Maseh. This year it's together. And we're seeking over here the element of the doubles. Why? Because we mentioned yesterday that doubling implies redemption. And why is doubling imply redemption? Because double, usually we say double trouble, but double is a good thing. Because double implies infinity and non-ending. So because double means when something ends, it loops over and it repeats. And the repetition of something really means that it never ends. It goes on and on and on and on and on forever. Now, the nature of existence, of creation, and of every entity in creation has an end. Everything has an end. Only God is endless, without an end, eternal, forever, and endless. The element of redemption is that creation can rise above the boundaries of its own created definitions and attach itself to the Creator, thereby eternalizing itself, becoming unified with the Ein Sof. It becomes infinite, and that's the ultimate meaning of redemption. That's why the prototype of all redemption is the exodus from Egypt, which in Hebrew, Egypt comes from the word Mitzrayim. The Hebrew word is not comes from the word, is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim means boundaries. Meitzar means a constriction. Because the idea of exodus, the idea of any redemption is to go out of Meitzarim, to go out of narrowness. This period of time, these 3 weeks that we're in now, is called between the straits, like the Straits of Hormuz, like where the action is taking place right now, a narrow piece of ocean, a narrow slice of ocean, if you might say, a narrow passageway. In a sense, all of creation and all of the cosmic order is narrow because it has an end. And only God is. So the whole idea of redemption is Hashem wants to take us into a journey into infinity. And that's also the theme of the second Torah portion of this week, which is Parshas Maseh, which begins with the 42 journeys that the Jewish people made when they were on the way to the promised land. And it calls them, these are the journeys that the Jewish people journeyed when they went out of Egypt. And the question is, they only went out of Egypt in one journey. It was their first journey that they left the borders of Egypt. Why does it say these are the journeys that the Jewish people journeyed leaving Egypt? Implying that all the 42 were leaving Egypt. And the explanation is given that Egypt is not just the land of Egypt. Wherever you are and it has a limit, you're still in Egypt. So real going out of Egypt means to go into limitlessness. That's the reason why double, which represents being imbued by the infinite or touching the infinite, is redemption. So the sages tell us, and we're going to come back to this later tonight, that in the Hebrew alphabet, in the Aleph Beis, we have 5 letters that are double letters. There are 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Is Aleph, Beis, Gimel. Aleph only has one version, Aleph. Beis has 2, but it's not really 2, it's 1. It's just the Beis, when you say it strong, emphasized, and then there is dagush, which means emphasized, and one is rafa, which is light, but it's the same letter. It's not really counted as two. Gimel is one, dalet is one. Each letter is one. When you get to the letter chaf, which is 20, which 20 actually is 2 times 10, so chaf is the first letter that doubles. There is a regular chaf, and there's another chaf, which is a complete different shape. That's why beis is not counted, because a beis and a vase are the same shape. It just has a dot in it or a non-dot in it. Same as a shin and a sin. It's the same 2 letters. One is emphasized, one is not, but it's the same letter. There are a few letters in the Torah that is one letter, but it has 2 forms. And it's used at the end of a word. When we put that letter at the end of a word, we use a different shape of it. So they're called mansepach or menatzpach. The letters are chaf, mem, nun, tzadik, and pei. Those are the 5 letters that are double letters. So the Midrash tells us that these 5 letters have redemption quality to them. And that when we look through history, we find that whenever there was a redemption in the world, it came through one of these double letters. Beginning with Abraham, who had his first redemption, and he was redeemed through the letter chaf, like it says, lech lecha. So there's the double cha sound. Those are the 2 chafs. So on and so forth. The Jews in Egypt were redeemed through the letter pei, which is again a double letter, because we know that the code of the redemption was given to them by Joseph, and it was pakod pakadati, I have remembered you, pei. And our redemption, we are expecting any moment, and we are already in the middle of the winds of this redemption, is going to be with the letter tzaddik, which is the last of those 5. That's why it's the greatest redemption, the grand finale of all the redemptions. And it comes through the word samachti, which is double tzaddik. That's what the sages say. So you see that double is always implying redemption. So after Tisha B'Av, which is the saddest, darkest, lowest point of the year, immediately we go into the Shabbos afterwards, which is called Shabbos Nachmu, the Shabbos of comfort, and we greet the Shabbos by hearing Isaiah, Yeshayahu, who comforts us with the word of God, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, be comforted my people. Immediately the double comfort. As the sages call it, Nachama Bekiflayim, a double comfort. So why? Because after the exile comes the soothing winds of redemption, and redemption is related to the element of double, as we're still going to explore even more later in this class. So what we found was interesting. In the end of the first Torah portion of this week, which is Parshas Matos, we find a doubling. And this time it's a double in the musical note, as we discussed in the first class number 1, that every word of Torah is accompanied with a tune. And how do you know? And usually when you're studying Torah, when I'm reading the Torah or I'm sharing Torah thoughts, I don't read it with the song, with the notes, but when Torah is read from a Torah scroll in a synagogue, in shul, on Shabbat, or on the holidays, the one who is reading it has to be fluent and knowledgeable in the tune. Because Torah is really a song. It's God's song. Now, this song is delivered to us by markings on top of the words. It's not in the Torah, you won't see it. The one who's reading the Torah has to practice and know those notes. But in a Chumash, in the books that, the Chumash, which is not the Torah scroll, over here we can see them. All those notes have names. One of those names is called a mercha kfula. Mercha kfula means a double mercha. Now, mercha is one of the names of one of the notes is called a mercha. Now, we're going to speak about that soon. Okay? So one of the notes is called a mercha. This note is called a mercha kfula, a double mercha. And it's only, even though the Torah has so many words, thousands upon thousands of words, all the other notes are used so frequently, so many, like hundreds and hundreds of times, every note. Many of them. Then there are more that are rare, like a shalsheles is the one that's an exciting one. It's formed by a shalsheles means a chain, and so it's like a chain going upward. And when the balkore, the one who's reading, reads a shalsheles, it's an exciting note. You read it and you go up, up, up. You go 3 times up. You pull on the word 3 times, and each time you're going higher and higher and higher. So you can literally hear that why that is the shape of it. So that's, I don't know how many shalshelos there are, maybe 7, 8 of them across the Torah. It's not such a, hold on. In a future, so the shalsheles that goes 3 times. So again, there's some of them in the Torah. The mercha kfula is very rare. There's only 3 of them in the Torah. Now, as I mentioned in last class, in the second, and one of them is in Parshas Matos, the last one. There's another 2 earlier. We're going to go through them. Now, Parshas Maseh, which is the second Torah portion of this week, we find the rarest trups, which we're not going to talk about tonight. 2 of them, Karnei Para and Yerech ben Yomo. Those are the rarest ones because they're only to be found 1 time in the Torah, and they appear in the second Torah portion this week. And obviously, there's some deep, deep, crazy secrets on that. Like everything in the Torah has deep secrets. We're going to try to get a little secret into the double of the word la, which is 3 words before the end of the Torah portion, of the first Torah portion of this week. And as we said yesterday, it's talking about the conquest of a city done by a man called Novach, who is from the tribe of Menashe, who went and conquered a city. This is on the eastern side of the Jordan River, a part of the land of Israel that was not meant to be part of Israel. But later, because of the request of the children of Reuven and the children of Gad, and then later Moshe slaps on half the tribe of Menashe, they're given on the eastern side of the land of Israel pieces of the land, part of the land. It's kind of like the land of Israel extends now and is larger than it was initially supposed to be. Now, and this land became available because the Jewish people fought a war against the 2 giants, Sichon and Og. And they took their land, the land of Edom and the land of Og Melech, on the land of Bashan. These are two lands on the east of the Jordan River, probably modern day Jordan today. The Jewish people lived in that, and the Bnei Gad, the tribes of Gad and Reuven, took that land with the half the tribe of Menashe. Now, first they went to conquer it. So one of the members of Shevet Menashe conquered the land, and he called it in his name. He named it after himself, Novach. So the pasuk says, Vayikra Allah, he called it Novach Bishmo, in his own name. He named the city Novach. On the word Vayikra Allah, he called her. What's the her? Her, which is the city. He called her by the name of Novach. The word her, La, has this double mercha. Now, just to explain what the note looks like, it's a double comma, like our comma that we would use in English. It's like a little mark like this. So imagine 2 of them beneath the letter, 1 and 1 inside of it, like 2 of them together. They go like this, and this is the trup. Now, if I would sing well, and I would hold notes well, then I would do the trup for you. But this is not one of my qualities to be singing, so I'm not going to sing now. And do you the sound of the law? I'm sure you can AI it or Google it, and you can find someone who will give you the right sound of how to do a law. But whatever it is, it's people notice it when you hear it because it takes the word and it emphasizes it strongly because the tune pulls out the word longer than the regular other words. Similar to the shalsheles that goes that we spoke about earlier, that really pulls out the word quite long. This not as long, but it's loud, strong, and emphasizes the word very strongly. Okay? Now, I told you yesterday, the Zohar calls a mercha kafula by the word trei taima, 2 notes. That means the main idea of this trop is that it's double. It's 2 notes, not 1 note. That's what it's about. There's no other note that's called 2 notes. This note is 2 notes, which emphasizes again the double. Now, pull this back to the class number 1. This indicates, in other words, you're seeing over here a red flag. A red flag, but what kind of flag? In other words, the Torah is trying to catch your attention. It's trying to wave to you a flag of redemption because it's giving you a double note, and double is redemption. In other words, it's saying here is buried redemption. I'm sorry, not buried. In here is a secret of redemption. It is also, now, the fact that it's not just that it's double. The fact that it's double notes. So in yesterday's class, we discussed in part 1 of that notes in general, the element of the Torah that is related to musical notes is futuristic. Because when we study Torah today, although we can sing the tune of the Torah, but it's meaningless to us. We don't know what these notes mean. It doesn't really carry any meaning other than it makes it pleasant. When you have a good Balkara, it's pleasant to hear. It's pleasant to the ear. But we don't really have understanding of it. It doesn't have any revealed meaning to us. And the reason is because the deepest, innermost secrets of the Torah in its most divine form is in the notes, not even in the words. The notes are much higher than the words. It's the mystery of the Torah. That's why in Hebrew we refer to the notes as tamim. Tamim means 3 things we said yesterday. Tamim means notes, song, musical notes. Tamim means taste, and tamim means reasons. It's the tastiest reasons which make you sing. It's a delight. It's the pure pleasure of the Torah, the divine pleasure. That's only going to be revealed in Moshiach's times. That's any note. Now, when you have a double note, it's double pleasure. It's double delight. It's off the charts, gewaldig. It's off the charts awesome. Now the question is, what's it doing in this week's Torah portion, which is a very dark period? Matos and Masay is always read in the darkest weeks of the year. It's the cold. It's the summer. It's hot, but it's in spiritually, it's the cold, dark concealment time of exile, of darkness. It doesn't get darker than this. So why do we have a flag waving in the wind that is calling for double pleasure? Obviously, it's telling us something about a secret about the exile, that in the exile itself is buried redemption. And the way to redemption and the way to unlock the ultimate, infinite, double pleasure of Torah is through these dark moments. So the darkness leads to the light. Like we discussed yesterday, is the theme of Matos in general, this Torah portion. Mata means a club, which can indicate the club of exile. Also a stick, as we discussed yesterday, which a staff is disconnected from its roots, separated and severed, It represents a time when a person feels alienated, disconnected. Our souls are like wandering in darkness. We try to find God. We try to find a connection. It's not necessarily always connecting. We're not always able to turn on the Wi-Fi signal and feel the divine vibrations. We feel blocked. Exile is a time of spiritual alienation, a time of blockage. So there is a disconnect, and yet what happens to a stick when it's disconnected? It becomes hard and firm and powerful. So the Jewish people become powerful, and the world, when it's in an exiled state, all the good elements in the world, although externally there is erosion, externally seems that we're losing, internally we're growing much stronger. And eventually it leads to Mashiach's staff. Mata uzcha yishlach Hashem, that God is going to send the staff of strength, which it says is Mashiach's staff. So again, from the darkness we go to the light. And that's the message. So now let's delve a little deeper into the secret and the mystery of the double trup of a Mercha Kfula. Okay, so let's start with a passage of the Zohar. Okay, so the Zohar tells us, this is in Parshat Shemini, which Shemini, no, where's the Zohar? The Zohar is not in Shemini. The Zohar is in Parshat Balak. Those of you who listen to all the classes might remember, or maybe you happen to have listened to this one, I once told a story about a Yanuka. A Yanuka was this child prodigy Kabbalist who appears in the Zohar, and all the sages of the Zohar, the great holy mystics, are blown away by this little boy that they find. It seems like this is like a once in a lifetime, a once in a millennia soul that God drops from heaven, that from when he's a tiny child, he already knows everything. So the sages tell a story about this Yanuka, and he opens his mouth as a little boy, and he's pouring gems of wisdom that the greatest mystics that form the book of the Zohar are like drinking from this little boy's mouth, like they're drinking from a fountain. So this passage of the Zohar that we're going to read now is part of what this Yanuka boy revealed. And it says over there, I'll read to you the Zohar, and we probably won't understand most of what it's saying, but what we're reading it is in order because we want to figure out the secret of this double trup on the word law, which is stated when Novach is going to takes a portion of land, a city, and names it in his name in the end of Parshas Matos. Okay, now the Zohar is not going to be speaking about our Torah portion. The Zohar is going to mention a different Mercha Kfula, meaning the Zohar is now going to bring a verse, which is the second time the Mercha Kfula note is found in the Torah. And that is in Parshash Shmini, in Leviticus, the third Torah portion of Leviticus, speaking about a difficult story. When the two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avuhu, the two great tzaddikim, righteous sons of Aaron, made a mistake and went into the holy temple on the first day when the temple stood, offered up ketores, the spices, the fragrance, the incense. And when they did that, a fire came out and consumed them and they died. Tragic event. So on the words that it says over there in the Torah portion, it says that they took a pan they took a ketores and they put it on a pan, I think it says, and they went inside, and it says they took ketores asher lo tziva osam, that they were not commanded. In other words, generally, all the everything that was done, all the rituals that were done in the Holy Temple were done by God's command and by God's instructions of how, what, and when. They went and they initiated a service that they were not asked to do. So the verse says, Asher loy tziva oisam, that they were not commanded. Which verse is it? It is tell you the verse if you want to look it up. Chapter 10 in Leviticus, verse number 1. And the end of the verse, now I'm going to correct myself. The Zohar we're going to learn now is not going to address that verse. The Zohar we're going to learn, but that's the other Mercha Kfula, in addition to the one over here. The Zohar is going to quote this little prodigy boy, quotes the first time the Mercha Kfula is stated. And that's not in Leviticus. That's in Genesis, in Bereshis. And that is in Parshas Toldos. Toldos is, again, which is when Isaac, you'll remember this story, one of the most dramatic stories in the Torah, when Isaac Yitzchak, when he thinks he's ready to maybe pass on from this world, tells his son Esau to go out and bring him something to eat, and then he will bless him. And then Rebecca goes and causes trouble and gets Yaakov, her younger son that she loves, she knows is a righteous one, not an evil person like Esau, to go in and sneak his way to his dad and present, since the father was mostly blind, to be able to pretend that he's Esau, and then he can take the blessings. That's what happened. So as Yaakov brings the food for his father, the mother, Rebecca, went and she cooked up, or roasted rather, 2 lambs, or 2 sheep, and 2 goats. What did she take? Shnei geduye izim toivim, 2 goats. And she prepared the meat, and he brings it to his father. And when he brought it to his father, he says to him, he says, okay, bring me the food. And then Yaakov goes and offers him wine. This is the verse in Genesis and Bereshis, Perek Chav Zayin, chapter 27, verse number 25. Bring it close, and I will eat from the hunt of my son, so that I can bless you. This is Isaac saying to Jacob, thinking he's Esau, he's Esav. And he brought the food close to him. Vayochel, and he ate. He brings the tray close to him, he eats. And then it says, Vayavelo yayin, he brings him wine. Vayesh, and he drinks. So on the word lo, there is a mercha kfula. This is the first mercha kfula there is in the Torah. So the first thing that's really interesting, which one should notice and one should recognize very much, is, if you're recognizing, you're paying attention, so when one can recognize is that every single time there is a mercha kfula, which is this unique double drop, it's on a word which starts. It's a 2-letter word, also a double word, 2 letters, only 2 letters, not more. And all of them, the first, it's a low. There's a difference. It's either lo or la or with an aleph. Lo with an aleph, which means no. Lo with a vav, which means him, to him, or lo with a la with a hey, which means to her. But it's always the same word. A lamed with an aleph, or a lamed with a vav, or a lamed with a hey. Those are the 3 words that all have mercha kfulas. So we will speak about that later. Okay, but now let's take a look at the Zohar. So the Zohar says, Taninan, we learn Shivin Rikian Inon, there are 7 heavens, and the Inon Heichalin, and these are 7 chambers. The Shis Inon, and they're 6, the Chamesh Inon, and they're 5. I have no idea what this means. There are 7, and they're really 6, and there's 5. Again, I don't know what the Zohar means here. V'kulo nafki migo yayin atika kadisha ilah. All of these chambers emerge from the ancient holy wine, from the supernal ancient holy wine. Ahu yayin Moshiach leYaakov merochik. So this wine that is so sublime, where these 7 heavens come from, which come from Atika Kadisha, which is the ancient one, or the holy ancient one, supernal one, from very, very deep and very high. Jacob was the one who drew this wine. That's what the little boy says. Yaakov, our father, is he's channeling the wine from this very high place. This is where he's bringing wine. The sachet le'ma'enovim dahu gefen, and he is squeezing the grapes from that vineyard, from where that wine comes from. Kedein Yaakov amshach le'ahu yayin because chazalei. And Yaakov brings down that wine, which is fitting for him. Fitting for who? For Isaac. V'chadi. And that brought joy to Isaac, caused him happiness. V'shasa, and he drank. Now, in order to give a prophetic blessing, this was a very high prophetic blessing that was going to be downloaded. You have to be in a prophecy only dwells on a person when they're happy. So the chadi, and he was joyous. V'shasa, and he drank. Hadod d'chsiv. This is what it means when it says vayav yayin vayesht. He brings him wine and he drinks. Okay, so we know one thing. It wasn't regular wine over here. This is a deep unplugging of a powerful, spiritual, godly source that is being plugged, and the wine is coming down. It's bringing joy, and it's opening up for the blessing. Very good. Hacha iskalil elavatata. When he did this, he caused a iskalil. Iskalil means a harmony between the upper and the lower. Valda, and for that reason, archik milah umashich loy. That's the reason why this word, what is it referring? Which word? The word lo is archik, it's distant, umashich, and it's drawn. That means it's a word that is drawn out. B'meshicho detrei tnu'e, because it's being drawn out with the song that is 2 notes. The fact that you're saying 2 notes on it makes the one who's reading this word dwell on the word longer. If it takes a second to say a different letter or a different word or whatever, the fact that there's a double note, it gives it another second, gives it 2 seconds to say the word, or 3 seconds, whatever it is. And that's the idea of lo to him. Leila tata, leila ela. Him, to him means over here, double means to him above and to him below. Okay. Now, what's the great secret over here? So now we say there's some kind of unification that's happening, connecting the upper and the lower. And Chanoch Metatron Omar. Now comes this little boy, and this little boy is getting all this information, this child prodigy. Where is he getting it from? He says there is an angel above called Chanoch. We know Enoch. Enoch was a human being, a very, very big tzaddik who lived before the flood, Noach's grandfather or great-grandfather, and he ascends to heaven as an angel. And he becomes the archangel, a very, very great angel called Metatron. He is the one who said this teaching about the wine. That he brought him wine. And it's not only that he was bringing down very high wine, but that he was causing a harmony over here, the upper and the lower. So Chanoch, the angel, Metatron, says this little boy is bringing us a teaching from this angel. I guess he had communications with him. And he says that the secret of this story is the Arme Maya Bahu Yayin. He mixed water into the wine. The ilav the arme b'mayim, and had he not mixed water into the wine, la yachalam is we would not be able to handle it. So what it seems to be happening over here is that this is an enormous, powerful, potent wine. It's coming from the Ancient of Days. It's coming from very, very high. Its potency is super, super potent. When Yaakov brought to him wine, and the emphasis is Moshiach, there's a double note over here, a mercha kfula, a double note. What the double note means is that Jacob, when he brought the wine to Isaac, mixed water into the wine to balance. He gave balance to the wine. Because if this wine would have been given without the water, it would have been way too intense. It would be unhandleable. The mixing of the water with the wine, that's it. The Shapir Omer Chanoch Metatron. Now this little boy says, and Chanoch, who is the angel Metatron, he's calling him by both his names, Chanoch and Metatron, he said correct. Ubegin kach amshach le b'drei taima. And it's for this reason it has two notes. It could be, the way I'm understanding it now is as follows. This boy did not hear from Chanoch, from this angel, that the reason there is the double note on the word lo is because he mixed the water with the wine. What he heard from Chanoch is this, just the concept that Yaakov, when he brought the wine to Isaac, to Yitzchak, he didn't just bring him plain wine, he mixed water into the wine. That's what he heard. Now the boy is saying that's the reason why there is a doubling. In other words, and the doubling you could say is that he's bringing him wine, but there's something else in the wine. That's the double, because it wasn't only wine. Okay? Because he was holding on to two sides. Now we're getting a little more clarity. He's holding on to two sides. What does that mean? So just a little tiny explanation. Wine, the source of wine is red, and the source of wine, generally, could be white wine also, but generally, and the source of wine is on the left side. Mystically, Kabbalistically, there are 10 sephirot, and there are sephirot on the right side, which represent kindness. The sephirot on the left side, which represent judgment. And the first of the sphere, and the right and the left first begin on the intellectual level. So on the right side is what we call the element of chachma, which is wisdom, which is the source of kindness. And on the left side is the attribute of bina, which is understanding, which is the source of judgment. Wine belongs on the left side. And but when Yaakov, and water comes from the right side. When Yaakov went and he mixed the water into the wine, meant that he caused an iskalalus. That's what we said earlier. He caused a integration, a certain harmony, and that's very much connected to who Yaakov is. Because we know that our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Abraham is the personification of chesed, of kindness. Yitzchak is the personification of gvura, of might and and judgment. And Yaakov is Tiferes. Tiferes is harmony. Yaakov takes and blends the kindness of his grandfather Abraham with the discipline of his father Isaac. And he creates a perfect harmony, which turns into compassion and beauty and truth, which truth is in the center. So Yaakov, who is all about harmony, creates harmony with the wine and the water. And he brings it to Isaac. And because of that, I guess he elicited a blessing that was perfect. Or else it would have been just too intense and would be too much gevura in this blessing, because it's coming from the man who personifies gevura. Yitzchak is full of gevura, full of judgment, and you want to you're bringing wine to Yitzchak. Wow! If Yitzchak is drinking wine, which wine is also from the side of gevura, you might end up with enormous, intense fire. So to mellow things out, Yaakov mixes the wine with the water, and now it's balanced and it's mellowed and it's perfect. And this is what this double trup over here, the Mercha Kfula, stands for. That the Mercha Kfula, according to what we're learning in the Zohar, is that there is the double notes represent pulling energies from two sides and creating into one word, into one experience, which means a certain harmony. The purpose of the harmony is to sweeten judgments, because Isaac is the source of judgments. Wine is in the root of judgments, and you're putting it in the water. You're creating. Now, obviously, this wasn't just a little story with wine and water. This is a story. This event is cosmic. This is the moment when the cosmic energies are coming into the world that are going to direct all of history. Because if Esau would have gotten the blessings, it would have been a whole different story. And Yaakov got the blessings, and empowering the Jewish people, and for the ultimate history until the Messianic age, and for all of eternity. And then this action, Yaakov saves the day by mixing the water with the wine. And that's the Mercha Kfula. Okay. So what we get now, when you're learning Zohar, you get only very vague. Okay, so we get a little vague something that the Mercha Kfula, the double note, has something to do with creating a balance and harmony, and particularly over here with the intention of sweetening judgments. Because as the Zohar says, if not for this water mixed into the wine, we would not be able to handle it. Okay. Now, let's move on to the Kabbalah. See, the Zohar is the original text, one of the first original texts of mysticism. Now we're going to fast forward a couple of 1,000 years later, after the making after the sages of the Zohar. We're going to go to a man whose yahrzeit was just 3 days ago. His name is Ramosha Cordovero. He's the Ramak. And he's one of the greatest Kabbalists. He was the teacher of all Kabbalists in the holy city of Tzfat, right before his student and the one who took over after him and kind of opened up a whole new understanding of Kabbalah was Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Luria, whose yahrzeit is going to be in about a week and a half. They're known as the Ari. So this is a Sefer Pardes Ramonim. And he has it's part of his Kabbalistic work is that he has an index, an encyclopedia, so to speak, on on every concept we find, what is the Kabbalistic meaning of a table? What is a Kabbalistic meaning of what is the internal energy of a lamp? What is the meaning of when we say heaven? What is heaven? What does a cloud mean? What is this way? In each of these things, what is the internal chemistry of it? So what in his book Pardes, he has a certain portal called Shar HaTamim, the portal of Tamim. Tamim means the portal of the Torah notes. This is it's portal 29 in his book Shar Chavtes. He goes through the deeper secret that is hidden in the notes. And even though we said earlier that the main secret of these notes we'll only find out when Mashiach comes, but we have some little whatever, something already now. He says, today, Taima, what are the two notes? You'll see it continues the theme that we're talking. Pirish Rashbi, the Rashbi explains, all of us shalom, Shehem Netzach V'Hod. In other words, he says that from the Zohar, it implies that the two notes are Netzach and Hod. Noitim el yamin, that bend to the right side. Lahamshech chesed, to tilt things towards kindness. So it's interesting. He says, following the theme that we were talking about, that we have something from the right and the left coming together, but tilting to the right. So if it's tilting to the right, it's following, you got the energy, literally, that we discussed earlier, pouring water into the wine, which is bringing the right into the left, and in a sense, dominating the right over the left, sweetening the judgments. We know that further down, before we spoke about Chachma, which is wisdom, and Bina, which is understanding in the intellect, the kind side of the mind, and the more rigid side of the mind. As we go down into the emotion, there is chesed, the emotion of love and kindness, and discipline and might. Lower than that are the more practical emotions, which means the emotions that drive towards behavior. And there is on the right side is netzach, which means perseverance. And on the left side, there is hod, which is glory, which is submission. Netzach and hod, which physiologically are related to the two thighs, going lower in the body. So he says that the two notes that there is in a Mercha Kfula is the coming together of these two dynamics of Netzach and Hod. However, if it's one on the right and which on the left, where is the pull? To which side is it pulling? Well, it's pulling to the right side. It's leaning to the right. Laham shecha chesed, to pull the kindness. The Hamorim ala zachar. Okay, I'm not going to get into this. Pirish Rashbi, and the Rashbi explains ki mitam ze itmar vayavel yayin vayesht, that he brought him wine and he drank. Betrayed taima with two notes. Lahagbir hatiferes, to intensify tiferes, which the whole idea of tiferes, which is harmony. Tiferes means beauty and harmony, which is Yaakov's midah, shumidasa shel Yaakov, which is the midah of Yaakov. Liyashrei al miskantai, to station it on its place. V'netzach v'hod, and when you have netzach and hod, lahatos hagvura letzad harachamim, to bend the gevura to the side of mercy, which is, we said earlier that Yaakov is a combination of Avram and Yitzchak. But which one dominates? In Yaakov, is he more tilting to the right or more tilting to the left? He tilts more to the right. That's why Abraham is kindness. Isaac is discipline. And what's Jacob? Mercy. Mercy, although it has notes of it's not like kindness that is just a giving without a reason. Kindness doesn't need a reason. It's just kindness just flows just to give and give and give. Compassion is already like there's some level of consideration. I'm not just giving. If you move me and you evoke mercy, then I'll give you. And mercy usually comes because you're in trouble. So there's a certain sense of gevura there, of harshness, of difficulty. In a difficult situation, I will give because I am moved, but I will give. Have compassion on me, have mercy on me. So it's mercy and kindness. Mercy is belongs in the more on the right side than it belongs on the left side. So this is what the Ramak is saying in the Trei Taima, in the Mercha Kfula that we said in this trop, that it is tilting to the right. Okay. So we're getting something to do with sweetening of judgments, tilting judgments to the right side. Okay. The Rebbe, and I'm not going really to him, poses a big question on the Ramak. And he says, I don't get the Ramak. Because if you're going to look at the way the trop looks like, remember I said earlier that every single one of these musical notes has a certain shape. And the shape depicts the energy of the energy flow, what's going on over here. If you look at a Mercha Kfula is not at all a note tilting to the right side. It's actually the opposite. It's a note, two commas, where both the strokes, when you're writing it, you're stroking to the left. You're starting on the upper right and you're going down to the bottom left. That's how you make a comma. So the Rebbe questions and says, I don't get what the Ramak is saying when he says it's Noite Ela Yomin, it's turning to the right. And the Ramak seems to be saying that's what the note is. It turns to the right. When you actually look at a Mercha Kfula, it's not going to the right, it's going to the left. The Rebbe says there's a different note called Ger Sheim, which is also one of the notes. That one tilts to the right. Let me open it up over here to the page of the notes, the beginning of the Torah of the portion. Gar Sheim is two commas that go on top of a word, and they're both going that way. Like if you put quotation marks, you have going this way and going that way. The Ger Sheim are toe notes tilting to the right. These are actually notes tilting to the left. Question. It will get answered later. Okay? What we're trying to do now is collect the evidence and get a good sense about what the secret of the Mercha Kfula is. Okay. Now, one thing we know for sure, or let's put it two things. Mercha Kfula is a harmony between two energies, Netzach and Hod, Chesed and Gevura. It depicts a unification of two, that's the idea, it's two notes, pulling from two directions. And it has to do, so far we're learning, at least according to the Ramak, implying from the Zohar also, at least in the first appearance of this trop in a story, of this musical note in a story of Torah, that story is a story of mixing water with wine, where the intention is to mellow things out to the right. What we call in Kabbalistic terminology, sweetening judgments. Now that's for sure, even according to the Rebbe's question. The Rebbe is only questioning what the Ramak says. The Lubavitch Rebbe is questioning what the Ramak says, that the Mercha Kfula are notes tilting to the right. He says, but that's not what it is. It's tilting to the left. That's a question he's asking. But he's not challenging, at least not yet, the notion, what implies from the Zohar, that at least the first time this trop appears, this musical note appears in the Torah in Genesis, that it's an energy tilting to the right. It's a harmony, and it's moving to the right. Now, where I'd like to take this next is the Lubavitcher Rebbe's father, who is an incredible genius Kabbalist. In his in his commentary for the book of Zohar, Reb Levi Yitzchak, we've learned many teachings of him, discusses this Mercha Kfula story. But he juxtaposes the first all three times when we find the Mercha Kfula, this double note. Again, we have it in Genesis by the story of the wine, bringing the wine for Isaac. The second time I told you earlier, remember, is when the two sons of Aaron offer up the ketores, the spices, the fragrance, and it says they brought a sacrifice, or they brought an offering that they were not commanded. The word not, the Hebrew word lo, is underscored with a mercha kfula as well. And finally, our Torah portion, which talks about this fellow by the name of Novach, who brings who conquers a city, and he calls it in his name. Okay, these are the three places. So Rebbe Levi Yitzchak is going to now kind of combine these three and say, hey, hold it. First of all, he's the one who's going to notice that's what really is interesting, is that all three of them are part of the same word with slightly different. They're all the word lo, and lo. The lamed is always the same. The only change in the letters are the one of them is with a vav. That's the first time it's mentioned in the Torah. Lo with a vav. The second one is with a hey. With an aleph. The one in Parsha Shmini. Lo, they were not commanded. Lo with an aleph. Finally, the third one is Vayikra Allah. He called her, the city. Novach called it Bishmo in his name. La with a hey. Okay? So he makes that, he noted, and he calls it a pele. He says that's a wonder. You don't find Mercha Kfula anywhere else, only in these three places, always on the same word, but different. So let's see. So first of all, he says, V'yesh deya sheshtuye yayin nichnasu. This is in Likutei Levi Yitzchak Parsha Shmini, page Reish Samaches, for those who want to look it inside. Now, a lot of what he says I don't understand, and that's okay. I mean, it's not okay. I should learn better and understand it. But right now, I haven't figured it out. But for our discussion for today, whatever we do understand is sufficient. Regarding the two sons of Aaron, who sadly died on the day of the inauguration of the temple, who brought the incense and which they were not commanded. So on the simple story of the Torah, their sin was they went in and officiated an officiation that they were not asked to do. And this is a holy place. This is God's place. You don't just do whatever you want. But the Talmud gives many opinions about what their sin was. One of the opinions is that they were bachelors. They did not get married. And they were supposed to be married, and God punished them. Another opinion was that they went in intoxicated. And how do we know that? Because immediately following this story, God tells Aaron, the next story in Parshas Shmini, is that when any Kohen, any priest comes to officiate in the temple, he has to be sober. You're not allowed to drink any wine and go in. So from there we learn, there's another opinion that they offered a halachic decision in front of their teacher Moshe. It's forbidden for a student, when a question is posed to a teacher, you're silent and you let the teacher answer. If you pipe up and you offer your opinion regarding the correct law, that is punishable by death. Not through a court, but at least heavenly God will, and that's why they died. So there's different reasons why they passed away. So he's going to follow now the reason, according to that opinion, that they drank wine. And here, the wine, here we'll get already, we'll find that so remember, this is the second time we meet this double trap. What's the connection? Here's a story about Yaakov bringing wine to Isaac. And here's a story of two sons of Aaron offering spices. So first of all, there's a little similarity. Yaakov is offering something to his father. He's bringing food to his father. Nadav and Avu are also offering up something to God. There's a similarity. But to make it even more similar is, according to the opinion, that they too were somehow engaged with wine. Yaakov is bringing wine to Yitzchak, and they drank the wine. So he makes an interesting distinction. He says there's a day that says shtuya yayin nechnasu yayin utoykef hagvura is the bina. Remember I said this earlier. Yayin, wine, is the most intense gvura coming from bina, from the left side, from bina, from understanding. Umuven shayayin chai. Now their wine that they drank was not balanced wine. It was not wine mixed with water. Had they drunk the wine mixed with water, this whole catastrophe would not have happened. What did we say earlier? When Yaakov brings Yitzchak the wine, had he not brought the wine with the water, had he not mixed the wine with the water, it would have been catastrophic. The world would not be able to handle that intensity that would happen then. It would have been fire with fire. Isaac is on the left side, wine is on the left side, and this is a moment of divine. You put these two together and you burn the world. So thank God Yaakov had the wisdom to mix the water in and save the day. This is now fast forward. Nadav and Avihu are engaged on the holiest day, the first day that God is in this world. They're bringing in officiating in the temple, and they make the mistake of touching wine, which we understand increases the experience. They're taking some alcohol to open themselves up to a higher consciousness, to a higher experience. And what's happening? But they forgot to mix the water with it. And it burns them, right? Now, how do you know? He wants to prove. Maybe they did mix it with water. How do we know it was pure? Now, it's something important to understand. Today's days, you don't have anybody mixing wine with water. If you're a wine drinker, you're mixing it with water, you're messing the whole wine up. The wines that they had back then, there was a certain potency to this wine that was just too strong. And you had to mix it with water. You find it all over the sages in the Talmudic times. Talk about mixing water, that they would always mix water with wine. It's not that you didn't know how to drink wine those days. They weren't as wine connoisseurs like today. The wines that they had was more potent, and I guess maybe when Moshiach comes, we'll get back wine with such potency. But it looks like there is some kind of a lessening of the wine today that we don't need to do this. But the way they produced it, or maybe just, I'm not exactly sure. But they would mix water with wine. Now, how do we know that they came with pure wine, unmixed, not mellowed out wine? Was because immediately after what they did, God warns the Kohanim, Aaron and his sons, do not drink any wine. And if you do drink wine and you do a service, you'll die. Now the halacha is that law, that if you drink wine, it's punishable by death. That's only if it's pure wine. But if it's wine mixed with water, it doesn't carry that punishment. So you see, and that was a derivative after the tragedy happened, so it should not happen again, is a sign that what they drank is the thing that God warned. He's warning on the thing that they're drinking. Since they drank wine, pure wine, so he's telling them not to drink pure wine. So from there you see, yayin derech shekrusay dafka, wine that gets you intoxicated. If you put a little water, one is not punished by death. Okay. And he says, so the wines that they drank, which was pure and it's not like the wine that Jacob brings to Isaac. Shasham over there, he mixed water into the wine. He brings the Zohar of Parshas Balak that we just said earlier, this passage of the Zohar. And that's why it says, lo, That's why it says the word lo, as we said, pitrei taima, with the double note, which implies the fusion of two elements, bringing wine, pulling from two sides, water and wine. Mercha kfula, a double mercha. V'kan, but over here, shasu yein chai, they drank pure wine, no water in it. But hold it. If that's the case, so why do we have a mercha kfula over here as well? You got to right away, when you're learning this, you got to right away object to what he seems to be saying, because if the whole, again, what's the indication that Yaakov did not bring Isaac pure wine, but he mixed the wine with the water? The indication to that is because it's a mercha kfula. It has a double note, which a double note implies two notes, two energies, from the right side and from the left side. And he says over here it wasn't the case, but hold it, over here it also has a double note. The same double note that's there is over here. But he emphasizes there's a difference. There, the word that is underscored by the mercha kfula, by this note, is lamed vav. That means the second letter is a vav. The kan ksiv lo tziva, but over here it's lo, also the same word, but lo with an aleph. But aleph gam came b'mercha. It also has a double mercha, but it's a different word. It's not lo with a vav, a lo with an aleph. V'nilmad hacham ahasam shekamoy hasam yayin kamoy kem hacha yayin. Now we will compare the two. Both of them have the same musical note. So that means that there's a certain resemblance. Over there was wine, over here was wine. But we will still hold on to the difference that the lo that has a vav to it means wine mixed with water. The lo that doesn't have the vav with it, which means not, which is a warning not to do it, is a lo with the letter aleph, which it says over here. But you still got to wonder, if mercha kfula, if the double note inherently means a mixture of two energies, so even though you have an aleph over here which implies not, maybe what he means is, since the lo means no, what no? So you're reading it, it wasn't commanded. But why wasn't it commanded? You know why? Because not mercha. I'm just getting this right. I was troubled by what he was saying. I couldn't figure this out. Again, later when we're going to see the Rebbe's interpretation and all of this, this is going to make sense. But just in the words of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, I'm catching something that I didn't catch earlier, because I was so bothered by this. So if we're saying that mercha kfula means a harmony of energies, so why would you have a mercha kfula when they went and it took unadulterated wine, unmixed wine? If it's not mixed, so why does it have a mercha kfula? But now, if the word is lo, not, what not? Not mercha kfula, not double. So you have to take the word and you have to take the trup together and create one message over here. What was lacking? What was absent? What was not here? What was missing? And they were trying to do something good. What was missing in their service? What was missing in the service was they forgot to put the water into the wine. And that's why it says lo. No, this was not a good action. By Yaakov, it was lo with a vav. Now, to go a little deeper into it, vav, and he's going to bring it soon. You know what? Let's leave this for soon. So we'll leave. V'yesh oid mercha kfula. He says now. He says there's one more mercha kfula in the Torah, one more double note in the Torah. That brings us to our Torah portion. The Torah b'tevis la, in the Torah when the word says la, vayikra la, he called her novach b'shmo. Yikra no b'shmo. And here's where he says v'hu pella. This is a wonder. Be'elu agimel. It's by these three: lo with an aleph, lo with a vav, and lo with a hey. Bikula matam or mercha kfula. By all of them, it's a mercha kfula. La behei. Oh, so now Reb Levi Yitzchak immediately crunches the numbers for us, crunches the Kabbalistic formula in 1 second, because that's what he's always doing. And he says, so let's now enter into each of these words and see what the difference is Kabbalistically between these levels. One is female, la to her. That's the one in our Torah portion. Now, her in Kabbalah is usually either Bina or Malchus. So he says over here it's Malchus, the attribute of kingship, which is the lowest of the 10 attributes, the feminine element of the divine. La, that's the Hey. Like we know in God's name, the latter Hey of Hashem's name is Malchus. So that's our La. Lo bevav, when we say lo lamed vav with a vav, hu bezah dechura, that's in the male element of the divine, in the 6 emotions. Chesed, Gevura, Teferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, 6 Sfirot, they are masculine emotions. They have a, and they mean to him. Okay, let me make a little introduction. The divine attributes are, in the emotional level, are 7. 6 of them are part of the man, and the 7th is the woman. They're called son and daughter, boy and girl, husband and wife. So the male sfirot are Chesed, Gevura, Teferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, 6. And that's why it's depicted by the letter Vav, which Vav is the numeric value of a Vav is 6. It's 6 spheres. And Vav, the letter Vav is always attached to a man, not to a woman. It's a male letter. For example, Yad means hand. If I say, and I add to the word Yad a Vav, and I say Yado, it means his hand. Rosh means a head. If I say Rosho, it means his head, implying a man's head, a boy's head. Anytime you add a Vav to the end of the word, it turns it male. Now, the female attribute, which is Malchus, which is the final, the vessel, the container, and translated later, it means the world, the recipient, is female. And the letter associated with is the letter Hey. That's why whenever you put a Hey and attach it to a word, go back to Yad, a hand, you put a Hey there, it's Yada, her hand. Rosh is a head, Rosha, her head. Because the Hey is Malchus. So therefore he says over here, when it says La to her, he called her. It's referring to Malchus. Now, Lo with a Vav, that's the male element. That's the Ze'er Anpin. And that's the story by Yaakov. Now, what makes the Ze'er Anpin very special is that its quality is that it is a very harmonious entity. The emotions are harmonized, 6 emotions. The centerpiece that harmonizes all the emotions together is Jacob. Because in the emotions itself, you can have Abraham, which is just an extreme right side of the emotion. Isaac, who's on the extreme left side of the emotion. Jacob represents the balancing energy that harmonizes both. So even though the Vav is 6, it depicts 6 Sfirot, but the main oomph of the main character, the main essence of the masculine emotion that holds them all together is Teferes. That's why Yaakov is the most identified with that letter Vav. Teferes is a Vav. So therefore, in Yaakov's story, it says, Vayavai lo, he brought them. Now, even though in the verse it's referring to Isaac, because he says, Vayavai lo, he brought to him. Jacob is bringing to him. Who's the him? It's Isaac. It's his father. But still, who's the one who's bringing? It's Yaakov. And what is he doing? He's putting water with the wine. He's mixing. Okay. Now, what's the third one? The third one, which is the one that we were talking about earlier, the one that speaks about the two sons of Aaron who did what they shouldn't do, right? What they shouldn't do. It says lo with an aleph. Now, aleph, Kabbalistically, relates to the attribute of bina. Where do we get bina with an aleph? The verse says, Alefcha, I will teach you. I will teach you chachma, I will teach you bina. So the letter aleph is associated with bina. And then it's lo with an aleph. Okay? Now, again, I know it's okay if we don't understand it yet. We're going to get more clarity soon. Loi ba'aleph ksiv benadav aviyu. It says by Nadav and Avu, Shehem minuhud de bina. They come from the netzach and the hod of bina. Mystically, the source of these two boys of Aaron are in netzach and hod. The two brothers, netzach and hod, are close to each other. Netzach is on the right side, we said earlier. Hod is on the left side. But they are the netzach and the hod of bina. Now I'm just going to drop a point over here, which is important to know. What happened what was the main cause of their death? We said earlier they drank, they didn't have a wife, they jumped and offered a halacha without first being silent in front of their teacher. They offered the spices when they weren't called to do so. What are all these? What is this all pointing to? It's all pointing to a certain intensity, a certain leaping energy. In mysticism, that's called ratzo, an excitement that just gets uncontrolled. It's a holy excitement, but it's unchecked. That's the point. It's unchecked fervor. It's unchecked fire. That was their energy. They ran in. They got excited. Wine. What does wine do? Alcohol. It takes away the controlling factors of the. Why is alcohol so dangerous? Because it takes away the controlling factors. It numbs the mind's control, and it allows the emotions to flow freely, the inside to flow. So in moderation, it can be really good, but without moderation, it goes and it. When you actually look at there in many latter commentators after the Talmud, when they describe the sin of Nadav and Avuhu, they say that they experienced such intense love for God on the first day that God's presence was in the world that they could not hold back, and their souls just dissolved themselves into the infinite light. It was the holiest suicide ever. But it was like, they just couldn't handle it. Their souls raptured into the Ein Sof. That's also the meaning that they were not married. Physically, they were not married, yes, but what's the deeper story? The woman represents the vessel. The woman can take her husband and keep him grounded. Without the woman, the man can float. A lot of times you see that. Now, women, they have a great ability to stay grounded. They're very, I'm painting with a broad brush, but this is a feminine character trait, to be very detailed oriented, very much down here. Man's energy can be a dreamer and be completely lost in imaginations. So not getting married meant that they didn't want to be anchored to earth. They didn't want to be burdened by family, by all this. They just wanted to be free spirits. And so that's their energy. Now, where is that energy to be found? Such an energy of rapture that's Bina. You see, Bina means comprehension and understanding. Through a overly expansive experience of Bina energy. Bina is like on the left side, fire. Through its energy, it causes contemplation, meditation that's related to Bina can cause an excitement and a rapture that is uncontrollable. So Ratzo, the energy of Ratzo racing towards holiness, comes from the energies of Bina. It needs to be tempered with the powers of Chachma, which the powers of Chachma, which is bittul, nullification, causes you to surrender to God and step back out of awe and out of fear and out of the recognition that God does not want you to dissolve yourself in him. He wants you to illuminate this world and be in your body and be in this world and be social and be present and be active and be down to earth. You need that balance. They were lacking that balance. They completely let go on the left side. That's why in the word Lamed Aleph, from the word lo is with an Aleph, which Aleph is Bina. This was their... So they had the Netzach and Hod element, but it was only in Bina, without tapping the lights of Chachma. The harmony that Yaakov has, they're lacking. Okay. But let's go back to Mercha Kfula now. Okay, let's go back to the Mercha Kfula. This piece that we just learned over here seems to be, in a certain sense, diminishing what we built up before. What we built up before is that the secret of Mercha Kfula is that it's always a harmony. Mercha Kfula means a combination, a harmony of two energies fusing together. Here we find that's true. By Yaakov, the Mercha Kfula emphasizes a harmony, because that's what Yaakov engaged with. He engaged with the sweetening of judgments and a harmony and so on and so forth. But at least in as much as the other one, the Mercha Kfula that is by Nadav and Avuhu, by the two brothers, it was a Bina experience, it was a wine experience, not tempered with water. So where do you have a Mercha Kfula then? We gave a little answer. Mercha Kfula still means harmony, but that's what the emphasis is. Lo, there was no harmony. Lo with an aleph. You have to attach the word, meaning Mercha. There should have been a Mercha Kfula, but there was no double note. They allowed an extreme, a singular energy, a singular motor. We're now operating with two motors, with two engines, but one engine alone. Okay. Now, I would like to. I know. I'm in a Kabbalistic playground over here, so if you stick by, and this part is a little overly Kabbalistic, I'm just having a good time, so please excuse. But soon, the latter part, the difference between the Rebbe and his father, by the way, is that his father is a Kabbalist all over the place. The Kabbalah flows like... The Rebbe is his father's son. He has all this ability to float with his dad. And the letters that the Rebbe sends between him and his father, you see that. But one of the most incredible things about the Rebbe is that the Rebbe does not generally do that. All of his teachings are always grounded, always very, very comprehensible, always to be able to be understood by the simple person, by the layman. It's a simple message. It's bringing it down. And even when but in this particular case, the Rebbe takes his father's intense wine ideas, and the Rebbe mixes the water in very well to bring it down. Okay, we'll see soon, and I think it's going to be very, very special once we get there. But in order to appreciate it, let's follow a little bit into this world of mystical secrets over here. Now, Loi ba'alef by Nadav Avihu, he says that Netzach lo behei, it says by Novach. Now, what's the connection of Novach to Malchus? We connected Yaakov is connected to Lamed with a Vav, because Yaakov is Tiferes. And Tiferes is the letter Vav. So by Yaakov, who is the energy of the Vav, which is Tiferes, and Tiferes is the perfect the perfect one who makes harmony. So by him, the Mercha Kfula is the most strongest, harmonious Mercha Kfula that there is. Perfect harmony. That's Yaakov. There is a Mercha Kfula by Nadav and Avuhu. Their souls are Bina souls, and they're moving only on the left side. Okay, as we discussed earlier. And that's why it's an Aleph. Aleph is in Bina. Now, this fellow called Novach, who's conquering a city over here, also gets a Mercha Kfula. He lands a Mercha Kfula, a double Mercha, and somehow it's connected to Malchus. Why? So, Benovach hu bebchinas Malchus is in Malchus. V'hainu lo behei. Okay. V'hu hasamach giborim hasovevim mitaso shalosh leimai. Be'etz chayim sharmoichen dekatnos perigim alayin shom. Here's a nice, Gavaldic, Kabbalistic idea. Regarding, from all the people, who personifies the attribute of kingship in this world? Obviously, Moshiach. He's going to be the ultimate king. But Moshiach gets it from his ancestors. From who? God gives kingship, the ultimate chosen one to be king is David. Now, David was the initiator of the divine kingship in this world. Excuse me. David HaMelech. But by him, the kingship was still challenged. All of his life he was challenged. There was a lot of problems. It wasn't settled in the world so well. Where did David's Malchus really reach its zenith and its completion? At least until Moshiach, was in his King Solomon, by his son Solomon. Shlomo HaMelech is the epitome of kingship as it is in its ultimate manifestation. So, by Shlomo, it says, one of the things it says about Shlomo, that he had 60, these kings were always, today we have the story that the Iranians want to assassinate Trump, right? It was the breaking story today. Kings always have someone they don't like them. So kings are paranoid. So it says regarding King Solomon, in Shlomo, the bed of Shlomo, Shishim Gaborim Savillah. He had 60 mighty armed men, 60 security guards that were around his belt. Kulam achuzei cherev, all of them were holding a sword. Malum de milchama, they were warriors, experts in war. That's what the verse says. We say it in the nighttime Shema. By saying that, I guess we draw down these 60 spiritual security guards to surround our bed and watch us. So mystically, it explains that Malchus, the Shlomo who personifies Malchus, has to be surrounded with 60 mighty men. These 60 mighty men are powers of Gevura. They're powers of the world. If they're warriors, where does warrior come from? Who do you see as a warrior, Abraham or Isaac? Isaac, because Isaac is on the side of Gevura. Warriors are fighters. War, right? Abraham, even though we don't find Isaac going to war, we find Abraham going to war. But still, the Indian of chesed, kindness, it's Gevura. So the 60 members that are surrounding, Shlomo's bed, are energies of Gevura. It says that just like it is physically in this world, so it is in the supernal attribute of God called Malchus. Malchus needs protection because she's vulnerable from the forces of darkness that derive energy from her and want to attack her. So she needs these these 60 powerful warriors that surround her. The word Novach is the Samach Giborim, the 60 Giborim, the 60 powers of Gevura that Sovev, they surround Malchus, the Shekhinah, and protect her. The word Novach, this is Reb Levi Yitzchak. The word Novach, the Rebbe's father, he says the word Novach, if you do the gematria, is spelled Nun Beis Ches. Nun is 50, Beis is 2, is 52, Ches is 8. So it's got 60. It says that Novach conquers a city. So Novach, he says, is associated with these 60 powerful powers of Gevura that go to Malchus. That's why the word La, which is Malchus, Novach is the one who's connected to it. He's calling her by his name, which means spiritually, over here is a secret of the 60 powerful Gevuras that are surrounding Malchus. Now, where do these Gevuras come from? Remember we said all Gevura traces itself on the left side all the way to Bina. He says the word Novach is indicative of Bina as well. First of all, it's 60. There are 60 powers of Gevura that are drawn down and go to Malchus. Where do these 60 Giborim come from? They're given to her by her husband. That's what it says. But where is he taking them? From his mom. He's taking them from Bina. Bina is where these powers of Gevura come from. The Shishim Giborim come from Bina. The word Novach, in addition to it being 60, also in every letter it depicts Bina. Why? Nun, we all know that Bina is made up of 50 gates. Whenever you see the number 50, it's always Bina. Because Bina is 50. Nun Shari Bina. It's a number associated with Bina. Ches, I'm going to go to the last letter. First of all, the word Bina you can say Beis is Bina starts with a Beis, but he doesn't say that. I'm not going to say that because he doesn't say that. But he says Ches. Bina is the 8th attribute from the bottom. Because you got Malchus, you have this, which is Malchus is 1. Then you have the 6 emotions, so it's 7, which are the male. And then above them is the mother, which is Bina. She's number 8. So Ches is Bina. Now Bina, what's the Beis? Beis, the word Beis means bias, means a house. Bina is a container for Chachma. Chachma is the energy that goes into Bina. Bina receives it. Bina is a receptacle. B'Chachma tivne bias. With Chachma, she builds a house. Bina is the house that houses Chachma. Bina means a full-fledged idea, understanding, which inside of it is a point. A point is Chachma, the flash of Chachma. So, in the word Novach, every letter of it is indicative of these 60 Giborim that come from Bina. And now, immediately, what do you see from here? Says Reb Levi Yitzchak, very interesting, that Novach and Nadav and Avuhu, the 2 times there is a Mercha Kvula, both of them have a Mercha, are similar, because they're both pulling from the left side, and they're not pulling from both sides. It's not like Yaakov. Yaakov's Mercha Kfula, his double note, he's dealing with wine and he's mixing it with water, which means sweetened judgments, sweetened gevuras. Nadav and Avuhu, we said, no, they were not mixing the water with the wine. And Novach, who's naming the city after himself, called Novach, and the city is her, which is Malchus, he's also bringing her a lot of Gevura, but not tempered with Chesed. Not bringing from the right side, only bringing from the left side. And that's a boo-boo. That doesn't work. Just like it harmed Nadav and Avuhu, it also is not good, seemingly, for the city in which he calls it. He's building this city with a lot of Gevura without Chesed, without kindness. Interesting. Let's take a look at the Rashi on this words, Vayikra Novach Bishmo. That's amazing. Rashi says, Vayikra Novach lo einoi mapike. It's the way it's spelled is it's read law as if it would be with sounding like a law sound, but if you look in the Chumash, it's without the dot. So it's as if it would say lo without the. It doesn't. It's not emphasized. It's not a. It doesn't have a strong la to her, which it always should have. V'ra'isi, I saw I saw in the teachings of Rabbi Moshe Hadarshon, because this name did not last. He named the city, but after a while it lost its name. That's why it's weak. It's lacking the oomph. He couldn't stake his flag there and call it that way, and it would remain that way. The name kind of floated away. Because the Medrash, and therefore it's as if it would say lo with an aleph, Vayikra lo, it's not. It's as if it would be with an aleph, because it's lacking the the dot inside the hay, which makes it it's as if it would be lo with an aleph, which means the name did not last. So Reb Leivik, the Rebbe's father, says the reason is because when you try to build something, a structure only on Gevura, only with from the left side, only with Gevura, it doesn't last. There's a negativity here. There's something no over here. Okay. So here he keeps it, however, very vague. Right now we have an idea that there's 3 Mercha Kfulas. 2 of them, or a second, and there's 3 Mercha Kfulas. Let's identify where they are Kabbalistically, mystically. All of them are in the same word, lo with a hay. I'm sorry, la with a hay, lo with a vav, and lo with an aleph. According to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak over here, the lo with a hay is in Malchus. The lo with a vav is in the Ze'er Anpin in the male, but primarily in the Teferes. And the lo with an aleph is in Bina. One of the interesting things that come out from this whole piece is that the concept of sweetening the judgments, which is supposed to be part of the Mercha Kfula, only seems to be working out in one of them, which is the first one, which is Yaakov mixing the water with the wine for Isaac. But in the other two, it's not. There's only a Gevura element. There is no sweetening of it, and therefore either it doesn't last or it causes death. There is a problem here. But you still didn't have to understand. So why does it emphasize? Why does it have a Mercha Kfula, which seems to be, as we spoke from the Ramak earlier, and the Zohar, that the Mercha Kfula itself implies harmony. 2 notes, 2 different directions. So regarding the first one, you can say that lo with an aleph means you're lacking the Mercha Kfula. But what are you going to say by the second one, by the Novach? Over there, it doesn't say lo with an aleph, it says lo with an hey. So it's not, maybe you can say like Rashi says. Rashi says that it's read as if it would be lo with an aleph. So that he doesn't say this, but there too, it's hinted to that there is no harmony. There's no mercha. Okay. To make this deliciously beautiful, we got to bring in the Rebbe. The Rebbe would teach his father's teachings all the time and give commentary on it. And as we said before, he would ground it much more. So, where am I here? Oh. So the Rebbe says, okay, let's step back for a moment here. And let's analyze what really is what is Mercha Kfula? What is it? What's this secret of the Mercha Kfula? So he says there is a Kabbalistic sefer called Shefatal. The Shefatal brings from an earlier Makubal, from an earlier mystic, is in a Sefer Tamei HaMikra, some Kabbalistic work that explains the reasons of the Psukim. And it's called Igeres HaTaimim. No, I'm sorry. It's called Igeres HaTaimim. And Igeres HaTaimim, it's a letter about the Trop, and it's printed in the book Shefatal. So who exactly is the author of the Igeres HaTaimim, I don't know. But it's basically someone who's must be a great mystic, and he was giving explanations into the significance of the Trops. Now, if you remember in the beginning of the class, I mentioned that mercha kfula means a double mercha. A mercha is a comma, is a shape of a comma. Mercha kfula means you have two of them, two consecutive ones together. But I mentioned earlier in the class that there is another trop that's singular. It's mercha. Just mercha, not mercha kfula. But it usually goes together with another trop called mercha tipcha, which basically what they are mercha is one comma going to the left, and tipcha is a comma going the other way, going to the right. And they usually when there's a mercha, it's usually followed with a tipcha. The next word is usually with a tipcha and you read it on two different words, a mercha and a tipcha, and they go together. So this sefer, this letter, explains the significance of all these of the Trops. Now, interesting. In this book, he does not have an explanation on the mercha kfula. That's going to be the Rebbe's explanation. The Rebbe's brings the letter because based on what all he does in that letter, in that sefer, in that letter, in that explanation, is that he explains the mercha tipcha, the regular mercha. Based on his explanation on the mercha tipcha, the Rebbe takes it further and explains the mercha kfula. And once we're going to have the Rebbe's explanation on it, suddenly all these pieces are going to start falling together and it's going to become so amazingly beautiful. Because all these things that we're struggling with over here, like if mercha kfula is always supposed to be some kind of a good thing, a sweetening of judgments, how come two of them seem to be harsh? And the other question the Rebbe asks, if mercha kfula is supposed to be a sweetening of judgments, so why are they really not pointing to the right? The Ramak says they're pointing to the right, but the Rebbe says they're not pointing to the right. They're pointing to the left. But they should be pointing to the right, if that's what the energy of a mercha kfula is. And how do these three concepts, these three places that have a mercha kfula, besides for the Kabbalistic idea that they're all on the word lamed, la, lo, and lo, three lows, and they depict three different levels. But what's the common denominator besides wine and wine? What really is flowing through these three, and how they can all share one trop, which is a mercha kfula, and how do all these ideas really, really come together as so this is what it all means. So bear with me now, and things are going to become much simpler now. Okay? And easier to grasp. So the Rebbe says, let's take a look what this book says on mercha tipcha. And what he says is like this. That the word mercha, which is spelled mem, resh, chaf, aleph, if you just switch one of the letters, you take the last letter aleph, which is in the end of the word, and you bump it up 2 letters, you put the aleph right after the mem, you get to the word marech. Marech means long. Ma'arech, or making something long. Long. Therefore, he says, that the word mercha is symbolic for a long something. And interesting, I don't know why, and we understand why, but he says, what's long? The exile is long. So mercha is indicative of a long exile. Again, this Igeres HaTaimim says, whenever you'll see a mercha, there's a secret something over here about a long exile. But he doesn't say it about mercha kfula. He says it about a regular mercha. Now, merchas are all over the Torah. But it has to do with long exile. That's why it's the next trup that comes afterward is tipcha. And he says the word tipcha, the meaning of the word, comes from the word tefach. Tefach is a handbreadth. He says when the exile is long, we are waiting for the hand. Which hand is this? The right hand of God. And what's the waiting? We're waiting for redemption. Now, how do we know where does the word tipcha have to do with redemption? It has to do with kindness. Because there's a verse that says, Af yadi, also my hand, tipcha shamayim. Also my hand spread out the heavens, God says. Which hand of God? Not af yadi. It says, the word says, V'yamini, I'm sorry. It's a verse in 24. Isaiah chapter 48, verse 13. It says, Af yadi yasta aretz. Also my hand founded the earth. V'yamini, and my right hand, tipcha shamayim, spread out the heavens. So the right hand of God spreads out the heavens, and use the word tipcha. So when you find over here, mercha tipcha, what you're really saying is, from the length of exile, we're hoping for tipcha, the hand breath of God, which is the right hand, because that's the one we don't find by the left hand that it uses the word tipcha, but by the right hand, we're looking for God's kindness. Okay, that we understand. When you're in exile, you're waiting for the hand to come redeem you. You're waiting for kindness. And then he says, you can also read the word tipcha. Besides the meaning of tipcha, meaning Hashem's right hand, there is a tipcha is like a woman, he says, hamitpachas kaf al kaf, banging a hand on a hand. What is that referring to? That's referring to when you're going through some very harsh stuff and you just can't handle it anymore. So the women, when they would mourn, they would clap their hands in mourning. And it's sad and in like frustration. The long exile, he says, mercha, the long exile, tipcha, causes a impatience, a frustration, which is the banging of the hand. And what are you banging for? You're waiting for the other meaning in tipcha, which is God's kindness. And he continues and he says, and what's going to happen? We go back to the word mercha. When the exile will end, mercha also comes from the word recha ba recha, which means kings. The Jewish people will be restored to their kingship, to a level of kingship. So what do you get from mercha tipcha? What are the concepts over here? We have a long exile. It's causing us anguish and frustration. We're seeking for tipcha, the kindness to come. And to do what? To restore them from the dark exile, to restore us to kingship. So what's the energy over here? What's the energy? The energy over here is a sweetening of judgments, no? You're starting off with judgments. You're starting off with a darkness. And the darkness needs to evolve into a sweetening. From a darkness to light. Okay. Good. Comes the Rebbe. And the Rebbe says, okay, I get it. That's your mercha. What does it mean, a mercha kafula? What does it mean when you have a double mercha? Oy gewalt. That means when it gets not just long, but it gets super long. It just doesn't end. Mercha, if mercha means from the word marich, very, very long. So double mercha means impossibly long. It means the exile that seems never to end. It means this long exile that's already close to 2,000 years. A stubborn, unyielding exile. That's the mercha. But what is the kfula? So one way of reading it is mercha kfula. Now, if the energy of mercha is from darkness to light, from exile to redemption, from judgments to sweetness, from bitterness to sweetness. So in the kfula, you also have to have, and just like he said earlier, that the mercha itself rises up to kingship, because in Aramaic, the word recha, which is the root of the word mercha, also means a king. So again, moving from through the darkness to the light. So mercha kfula, which is double darkness, has to be double light. Ooh. So now we go to the other meaning of kfula. Kfula means double, that we learned earlier in the beginning of the class today, that whenever there's double, it means touching the infinite, which is redemption. What does that mean? That the long exile, where does it lead us? It leads us to doubles. It leads us to the ultimate geula, to redemption. Like we said, all the letters of the Aleph Beis that are double are redemption. And how does exile lead to redemption? How does exile itself transition into redemption? It's because exile and darkness press on our souls, cause tremendous anguish and tension. They stress the soul out. And what happens when a soul gets stressed? It stresses until the soul can't handle it anymore, and it breaks open. And when it breaks open, the depth of the soul comes out. The desire, in other words, if you keep on pushing a soul away from God, farther and farther and farther and farther, at a certain point, it reaches a breaking point, and it raptures, and then the energy that it has in its return is dynamite. That's tshuva. Tshuva is also called double. The greatness of a bal tshuva, of a penitent over a tzaddik, it says, is that a tzaddik loves God with a singular love. A bal tshuva, a penitent, someone who's returning after being disconnected, is racing to God with a double energy, a double vitality. Tshuva, the Talmud tells us that if a person sinned, what should he do? What should he do? You want to do tshuva, you sinned. So the Talmud says, I gave a very good idea. If you used to study, let's say he's got a good person, he's a good Jew, he's learning, he's davening, and then he sinned. What do you do the next day? Should you wallow in your depression that you sinned? The Talmud says no. No, what you should do? Double your efforts in holiness. If you used to study every day 1 page, do 2 pages. If you used to say 1 psalm, say 2 psalms. If you used to give $1 to every poor person you met, now give $2. Now everything has to double. A bal tshuva is the energy of double. And since tshuva is double, it leads to geula, which redemption is also double. So now, when you have a double exile, when you have a mercha, a marach, a darkness that just gets dark and dark and dark and dark, what will that cause? It eventually causes an awakening, a stirring, a yearning, a tshuva, a repentance, a turning to God that is with double energy of double, which remember what we learned, double doesn't only mean double. Double really means a never ending. It causes because when things are good, kind of we stay within our limitations. But the tension and the stress, the stress of the darkness and of the distance and of the difficulties and of the challenges cause that intensification. And that doubling leads to the doubling of Gula. That's the secret, the Rebbe says, of Mercha Kfula. So now, based on that itself, we right away see that a Mercha Kfula, its entire essence is a sweetening of judgments. Because you're looking at a negative situation of judgments, exile is judgment, and you're recognizing that the whole purpose of these judgments, of these darkness, is to lead to a sweetening, to lead to something better than you've ever had before. To see that the exile ultimately will pay off in its dividends, that's something tremendously good. I mean, this is really what it's all about, because at the bottom line, everybody sees that this world has been a world of darkness. With all the good things that happened to all of humanity, and so much good things happen to so many people, what's mostly felt after so many years is we have a history of pain and hurt. And we know that this can't be God's world, that there's so much suffering, so much pain. So we know it will be good, and we're not only will it be good, but we will reach such a goodness that is impossible even to comprehend. But that's a process. From the darkness and from the suffering comes the good and comes the light. This is a sweetening of the judgments of the Mercha Kfula. If so let's stop for a moment. And this is the idea. Now let's take it. This is the idea. Let's go to the first Mercha Kfula. We're talking about Yaakov, who's the father of the Jewish people. He's beginning the whole history of a people. He's the one who's going to create the tribes and begin the story of Israel, which the story of Israel is going to be a story of most of our history of pain and suffering, of nonstop anti-Semitism, of nonstop persecution, nonstop. That's our story. And Isaac and Yaakov is going to who? To his father Isaac, who's the source of judgments. And he's tampering now, since this is holy judgment. Yaakov is going there and he's going to sweeten, which means he's going to uncover the deeper essence of any judgment and make sure that there is a good at the end of the tunnel. There is a light, that the harshness is not going to end in a crushing, breaking, God forbid, but we're going to make it through. And not only that, we're going to get to the incredible gains and the incredible light that comes after the darkness. And this is why this story of Yaakov taking the water and mixing it in the wine, that the angel Metatron is the one who reveals it, Chanoch reveals it, the secret of what he did. And over there you have the Mercha Kfula. The first time the Mercha Kfula appears is because this is the moment of this, that this is being revealed, that from darkness comes the light. So says the Rebbe, but if you look at my father's teachings, you see the Rebbe says that is only in the first Mercha Kfula, the one in Genesis. But in the other Mercha Kfulas, it would seem my father is saying that those are judgments that have not been sweetened. That was the sin of Nadav and Avuhu. They drank wine, but they didn't mix it with water. In the story of Noach, you got the 60 powers of Gevura, but you only have Gevura energy surrounding Malchus, and you're trying to build a city just with Gevura without any kind energy. It's the trouble. But isn't the Mercha Kfula all about from the darkness comes the light? That's its essence of it. So what are the Mercha Kfulas doing there? So the Rebbe says, the secret is like this. Since the Mercha Kfula is all about sweetening the judgments, when do you see the sweetness that's in the judgments? You don't see it in the time of the judgments. If you went to the Jew who was on the carts, on the trains that were on the way to Auschwitz, the Jew did not see no sweetening of judgments. He didn't understand what he's doing, looking out of the window, not knowing where he's going, what's going, looking at I don't know, there's no window there, I don't know what that was. Closed boxed cattle cars, right? He didn't go to the Jews who were persecuted by the Inquisition, languished in an Inquisition dungeon over there, tortured, and then taken out to be burnt at the stake. The Crusader mob coming into the Jewish cities and just dragging people off to be baptized by force, doing whatever they were doing in these dark days, in the communist gulags, October 7th, while it's happening, we're good. Where's good? It's just darkness. You don't see no good. So the Rebbe says like this: in the beginning, the initial start of it all is a good intention. In the end, you feel that the darkness must be leading to light. But during the darkness, you just feel Gevura. You don't feel the light. You feel just the darkness. So the Rebbe says that's the difference than the first Mercha Kfula. The first one is the main one, he says, because that's the one that depicts really what it's all about. That the pain and the suffering and the darkness leads to, it will be sweetened, and meaning the sweetening is to reveal the intention of it, the eventual goodness that comes out of it. Fine. That Yaakov was able to see that because he saw to the very end, and at the very beginning he sees that. But during the next two Mercha Kfulas, the Rebbe says, is the experience of the long exile. During the exile, when we don't see the chesed, we don't see the sweetening of it. We see just the judgments. And he says, now let's take a look at the two stories and see what part of the exile they represent. The story of Nadav and Avuhu represents the cause of exile. The cause of exile is, like we say in our prayers, because of our sins, galinu ma'artzenu. We've been exiled from our land. So sins, that's what it is. What caused the Jewish people to go into exile was sin. Now, of course, we sinned. Hidden in the sin is really a divine plan. We sin because we're humans and we have evil inclination and we sin. But are we really humans? Yes, but are we really, really human? No, we really are a divine soul. And a divine soul shouldn't sin. It should not sin. So why do we sin? Because from heaven they make us sin. That's the story. There's a pasuk that says, Noira alila b'nei Adam, that God casts a libel on a person. He sets us up at times to sin. Now, it's very, very important. The Rebbe emphasizes very strong. Very, very important point. Although God is orchestrating everything that causes a person to sin, we still have free choice. And therefore, we're held accountable for the sins that we do. But at the same time, it was God who's at fault. And yet, we still have free choice. So in other words, there is a certain divine plan that that causes that even though we have free choice, sets us up that we would make mistakes, we will fall, we will stumble, and we will, and as a result of that, we will fall into exile, we will fall into darkness. And the purposes that we said before, because only in the darkness and in the separation and in this thing that will create the stress that will stress the soul, that will uncover a much deeper bond that the soul has with God, which is the double energy, which is the energy of tshuva, which that energy of tshuva will bring us to the ultimate revelation of God that would never be able to be revealed in the world had we not gotten to it through tshuva. Because if we're serving God with a limited appetite, with a limited desire, with a limited connection, then what we're tapping in the divine is only a limited manifestation or a limited revelation of God, and that's not geula, that's not redemption. So there really is no other choice but to get us to sin and then to blame us for it. That's true. But it is still orchestrated from above. That concept, and that's the source of the exile. So the second mercha is about exile. It's a long exile. The second mercha is the actual exile, which the actual exile means it starts with sinning. The exile doesn't begin in the exile when we're kicked out. It begins when Jews started messing with God's commandments, and that's where. So what's the second mercha kfula? The second mercha kfula is on the word asher lo tziva, that he did not command. Nadav and Avu, who did a sin, God did not command them to bring this ketores. So in general, it depicts the idea of violating a command, not command, or tziva lo, what God commanded not to do, which really surrounds all sins. And perhaps we can make the connection and say, just like when they sinned, it really wasn't sin in a regular sense. It was an incredibly godly sin. They were yearning to connect to God in a way that is like forbidden because they they trespassed where they weren't allowed to. Or they, as we discussed earlier, they allowed their desire to cleave to God to go so far that they left their bodies, which is undesirable. And we can, and why did they do that? Because they couldn't hold back, because there was such divine revelation. God sucked them in. They were sucked in like a vacuum cleaner sucking in. They couldn't restrain themselves. So we can learn from here that really all sins is God's vacuum cleaner causing, but the other way, instead of sucking us in, it pushes us so far. But the point over here is there is a low, the sin, and the sin is part of the mercha, which leads us to the mercha, to the exile, to the long exile. Now, in this story itself, also is hinted to the tshuva that will come as a result of the disconnect. Because what was their sin? Their sin was they had a burning, uncontrollable, unquenchable desire that caused them to leave their body. Well, that's what a Baal Tshuva is. So from the sin of disconnecting, eventually, what does it lead to? It leads to coming back. God forbid. From disconnecting comes all the pain and the sorrow and all the mistakes. As we all know in our lives, we make mistakes and then we regret it. And the regret eventually, hopefully, can lead us to a much... People that go through and made mistakes in their life, if they manage to rehabilitate, they're the most amazing people that there are. Because they've been there, done that, made the mistakes, and bounced back, and they're much stronger people than people that never went down the dark road. So there is a purpose. And in the story itself of the two sons of Aaron, you have Lo Tziva, that was not commanded. You have the divine element causing that in that story very clearly. But you also have the rectification, because what do we gain from every Baal Tshuva is to be like the two sons of Aaron. Forget about the sin part of it. Is to have such a burning desire for God, minus the exiting the body. But coming close to that, what only a Baal Tshuva has. However, when we're sinning, God forbid, when we're still in the midst of the free fall of sinning, we don't see any good. You see good when? Now that we're studying about it, now that we're learning about this, that Chassidus is teaching us. But without it, sin is terrible, bad, and horrible. We learn the entire Torah minus Chassidus, minus what we're learning over here, which these are the teachings already of Mashiach. It's the teachings of the future. Sin is terrible. It's bad. It means you only see the gevura. You only see the harshment. You only see the wine. You don't see the water mixed with the wine. So therefore, the mercha kfula, as it is applied, besides the first one, which is the main, the Rebbe says the first one is the main mercha kfula. It's the big one, because that one gives you the full story. The mixing of the water with the wine, because that's before the whole thing. It's like getting into God's mind before he creates the world and seeing what's his plan with all this darkness. The long exile has to lead to what? Kfula, double goodness, infinite goodness. That's the first one. But as it begins to unfold and manifest, as what? As God giving us a good push, causing us to stumble and fall and to sin and to bring about, as we learned over here, this mercha kfula does not have any chesed to it, at least in a visible play. All you see is the gevura. You see you see the judgment, you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. What's the third mercha kfula? The third mercha kfula, the Rebbe says, is the one by Novach, who calls the city. Let's see what the context is. The context is that the Jewish people are conquering land that is not part of Israel, but outside of the land of Israel, and making that be kind of annexed to the land. The Rebbe says, what's the other benefit? What's really the other benefit of exile? What happens in exile? Jews leave the land of Israel and go out of the land of Israel. And where do we go? We traverse the entire world. We migrate. We move from the Jewish people are scattered all over the diaspora, all across the world. What's the deeper story? The deeper story is we're annexing the entire world to the land of Israel, not physically to become world dominance, but to transform and make the entire world a holy place. Even the darkest corners of the earth should be ready for divine revelation that's going to be in the time of Moshiach. So the story of what's his name? Novach, conquering a city and naming it with his name, Novach, is another element of exile. Because during the time when we're not in exile, what are we doing outside of the land, on the other side of the Jordan? We're in our home. We're in our base. We're close to the Holy Temple. Going outside, Ever Hayardin, on the other side, and making that Israel is an exile exercise. And again, while we're wandering across the world in all the various different countries, it feels only gevura. You don't see any chesed. You don't really understand the purpose of it. Jews have been always yearning to go back home to the land of Israel and saying, what in the world are we doing over here? Why do we have to be in Ukraine? What are we doing in Poland? What are we doing no one likes us over here. What are we doing in France? What are we doing in we want to be home. And yet, Jews couldn't do it. It was, but what's really happening is there is a divine purpose. There is something godly over there, but it's not felt. You don't see that you're making the lands, you're making the places holy. It feels as unholy. On a visible level, you don't see it. All you see is just wandering and disconnect and being far away. So that's what the Rebbe says, the difference between the first mercha kful and but the truth is, even while we don't know it and we don't experience it, like the two sons of Aaron did not mix the wine with the water, and even while we're wandering around place to place, and we don't know that we're transforming the whole world into godliness, it is still happening. In other words, the whole concept of the exile, the whole theater of exile is a theater of transforming judgments to taking the judgments and transforming it to kindness, mixing or sweetening the judgments to what it is. It's sweetening and transforming every darkness in the world to light. It's just that in the middle of it, you don't feel it. You don't see it. But what's really buried over there? The greatest light. The greatest redemption. All this leads, the sin, the alienation, the distance, creates such number one, which wherever we are in the distance, we're leaving our godly footprints behind, our godly fingerprints behind, through the mitzvahs that we're doing all over the world. In addition to that, it's the lack of observance, the lack of connection. Think about Jews who are very little observant or hardly observant. Their souls are so stressed out. And we who maybe are observant, but we still don't have the light that we have. And we try to pray and we have so much distractions and we try to learn and we're so limited and our minds are so scattered. And so I'm saying in every level, especially those that are not privy to, this is all what we call, we might call it, not collateral, what do they call it? Damage from the exile. And yet what's really happening? It's all preparing for the ultimate tshuva. It's all to come to the double light, which comes from, as we said earlier, pulling a soul to the farthest state of disconnect. Boom, it boomerangs. And when it boomerangs with such energy that is impossible. So it has that purpose. Now he says, then he adds insight in the three places. Based on this, so now let's go back to the three words in which the Merech Kfula is. All of them, as he brings from his father, lo, and lo. Lo with a hey, lo with a vav, and lo with an aleph. He says, number one, first of all, he adds beauty to what his father says. He says, we said la is referring to Malchus because it's female, the one in our Torah portion. Well, he says that you can actually see not only in the word, but in the content of what the Torah is talking about. We're talking about naming a piece of land, a city, which was juxtaposed to the land of Israel by a name. But the land of Israel is Malchus. So naming a city which is later going to become part of Israel. Okay, we said earlier the name did not stick. Fine. But naming the city by the name of the land is related to the land of Israel, which the land of Israel is Malchus. So the content fits the Kabbalistic idea because it's regarding the land of Israel, which is Malchus. Now, the one that has a lamed with a vav, which is referring to Yaakov's story, well, that makes sense as well, because what's the context of the story over there is that he brings wine and he mixes the water with the wine, as we said earlier. And mixing water with wine is the essence of Tiferes, of lo. Tiferes is, as we said before, the Vav is the 6 emotions, primarily Tiferes, which Yaakov personifies, and Tiferes is a mix. So the content fits the sphera, the attribute that is depicted in the word. The story of Parsha Shmini, which says lo with an aleph, which we said aleph is in Bina, also fits, the concept also fits, because what's the concept over there? What was the story over there? Is that they were engaging in a desire to connect to God that knows no limits. We said earlier, that's in Bina. Bina is where the ratzo happens, is where that excitement happens. So the 3 places fit, but the Rebbe says, in the context that we said earlier, that all 3 places are depicting and speaking of the sweetening of the exile, the transforming of the exile, bringing all the darkness ultimately to the kefil, to the doubling of the light, bringing it to the 5. Remember we said before that 5 letters are double. 5 letters of double represent the 5 powers of Gevura. Ultimately, all the Gevura starts in Bina, which Bina is a hay, and there are 5 powers of Gevura to sweeten every one of those letters, to sweeten all the judgments. There should never be any judgments in the world at all. What leads us to that is tshuva, is the repentance, which is also double energy, as we discussed earlier. Now we'll understand these 3 tshuvas because there are 3 levels of tshuva. There's tshuva of nefesh, there's tshuva of ruach, and there's tshuva of neshama. There's something called nefesh, ruach, neshama. 3 levels of soul in our bodies. The nefesh, ruach, each one has its own tshuva. The tshuva of nefesh is a tshuva of behavior, that our thought, speech, and action should be in accordance to God's will. That's the first level of tshuva. The second level of tshuva is the tshuva of the emotions, on a much deeper, that emotionally, our emotions should be fixed and not be, to be repaired, that our emotions should be in a healthy, godly way. And the third level of tshuva is the tshuva of the intellect, that our mind should be plugged into God completely. So the tshuva of behavior is called the tshuva of malchus, which is the law with a hay. The tshuva, the repentance of the vav, is the tshuva of the emotions, and the tshuva of the aleph is the tshuva of the intellect. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, 3 levels of tshuva. Which now leads us to the last and final thought. The Rebbe says if you take the 3 letters on which you have, the 3 words on which you have the mercha kfula, this double trup is lo with a vav. We said lo with a hey and lo with an aleph. The lameds always stay the same. Now, there's a secret to that, and I'm not going to go into that. That's in Lakuti Levi Yitzchak, he goes in a deep mystical explanation on that. But the vav, the aleph, and the hey, we just said these different levels, but they also spell a word. Aleph, vav, hey gives you the word Eva. Aleph is E, vav, Eva. What does Eva mean? Eva means he desired, which is very powerful. There's a verse that says, Ki Yaakov bacha lo Hashem, that Jacob, God chose Yisrael's. Hold on. Ki vachar Hashem b'tzion. God chose Zion. Eva l'moshav lo. He desired that should be his seat. The word Eva comes from it's the root of the word taiva. Taiva means when someone lusts for something. God lusts to have a home in this world. Eva l'moshav lo. God wanted Zion. He wants to rest in this world. He wants to have a dwelling place in this world. The long exile, the mercha kfula, on all the levels that we discussed. It's to lead to an ultimate goodness. But what's that goodness? That goodness is God is having a home in this world. He's going to fully manifest and reveal himself with all of his infinity and imbue us with that and unify with us on the deepest level. And this is something he longed for. And as a result of this longing is costing so much pain and suffering. But if God is longing for it, we know it's good. The root of all these three mercha kfulas are these three letters, Eva. It spells a yearning. It spells a longing. It's a divine fulfillment that comes out of it all. So even though while we're going through it, it seems impossible to understand, impossible to comprehend, just darkness, but Eva. Aleph of Hey. Eva l'moshav. That's the secret of this mercha kfula. So smack in the middle of the darkness of the 3 weeks, when you hear the Balkori read the Vayikra La, he called her Novach Bishmo, Vayikra La, and he does a long trup on this Shabbos, make sure to feel and to sense that this darkness came about because God desires to have a home in this world. And he's not just desires, he's longing for it. And he's finally going to have it. And this is the price that it costs. But it's a price that we one day going to say it was well worth it. And remember, during the time while we're going through it, we can't comprehend how it's well worth it. Yaakov was able to see that when he got a glimpse at all of history, when he was mixing the water with the wine right at the first time. We're not going to see it until it's over and we're on the other side. But at least now we can talk about it. And we remember evil. Okay, there's one more very powerful teaching to add to this, but I'm going to leave this for now because it'll be a little too much. So we have to leave something for after when Moshiach is here already. And meanwhile, let all the darkness transform. Let us come out of the concealments. Let us already come to a state of lichtigkeit. And the mercha kfula should transform to its intended state. And we should rise from the mercha to the reicha that we spoke earlier, to the level of kingship. And no more darkness and no more concealment and only light. Forever and ever and ever. L'chaim, 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 l'bracha.